What's the absolute worst thing that could happen when it comes to medical aid? Is that you're presented with a bill or from your doctor or the hospital, and suddenly your medical aid is not covering it. Now, the issue here is not so much the medical aid, because sometimes, and this is the mistake I want to share in this video, sometimes you actually don't have a medical aid. Now, I'm Devan Naika, and I help government employees and retirees live the best life possible with the money they have. And the series that you're watching guides you on everything you need to know when it comes to choosing the best medical aid. But what if what you have is not a medical aid? The first secret that I want to share with you today is sometimes you have to make a choice between medical aid and medical insurance. And why this is such a key decision is one of them is going to pay your hospital bills and the other is going to pay you. So we're going to start off having a look at the differences between these two options. And I'm starting off just from that perspective, right? From the payment perspective itself. Now, the first key difference between medical aid and medical insurance, and I'll write the medical aid section in blue so that you're able to follow, and we'll write medical insurance section in a gold color. The first key thing that I want to share with you is on the medical aid side, the medical aid doesn't necessarily pay you, right? The payment happens directly to the hospital, or the payment is going to happen to a doctor. There are certain instances where the doctor is not contracted to the medical aid. So the doctor chooses to operate privately. If the doctor is doing that, it means that the medical aid now is you're going to submit the claim through to the medical aid. The medical aid makes the payment to you, and then you'll pay that money over. But in most instances, the medical aid is paying directly through to the hospital and to the medical practitioner. Now, if we change that and you look in terms of the insurance, right? Now, first, I want to give you some perspective as to what the insurance could be. Medical insurance could be dread disease cover, or it could be, you might know it as illness cover. So that is cover that provides you for a heart attack, stroke, cancer, bypass, a defined list of illnesses, right? Alternatively, this could be something that provides you with a payment per day that you are in hospital. That you are hospitalized, right? So, for example, it could be 1,000 Rand a day, in which case, you're getting a set Rand amount. Now, there comes in the difference, right? The medical insurance is going to pay you. It doesn't pay you to hospital. It doesn't pay you to the doctor. Now, why this is so critical? Let's imagine that you happen to get treatment, and the cost for that treatment was, I'll say 100,000, right? So here, the cost for the treatment is 100,000. If it's a medical aid, the medical aid can then make that payment straight through to the hospital. It can make the payment through to the doctor, right? Because it's not paying to you, it's paying for your stay in hospital and whatever took place inside of that. If you have hospital insurance or medical insurance, and it's this particular option here where it's paying you per day that you are hospitalized, they could pay you 1,000 Rand a day, again, using my example. And if you're in hospital for 7 days, they're now making 7 times 1,000 Rand as a payment here. So if we had to put it down in figures, 7 times 1,000 Rand is what's getting paid, which means a total of 7,000. And then you're starting to see the difference, because if the medical aid is now, well, not the medical aid, if the medical insurance is paying 7,000 and the hospital is claiming 100,000, you now have a huge shortfall to cover. So this is a key difference when it comes to choosing medical aid versus medical insurance. Can be extremely tempting because the premium for a medical aid is a lot higher than the premium for medical insurance, right? Because medical insurance is covering at a smaller rate, especially in this case. Or when it comes to dread disease and illness cover, there's a predefined list, right? There's a list of so many events that are being covered. Whereas with medical aid, it doesn't matter how you end up in the hospital, it's designed to provide you with that type of cover. So that takes me to the next point, which is what is covered, right? On the medical aid, it's easy to know what is covered. It all depends on the type of benefits that you have been structured, right? But all Medicaids are going to provide you with cover for the hospital itself, right? So you don't have to use a government facility, a clinic or hospital. You're now able to get to a private hospital and the medical aid is going to cover it. There are certain instances where the hospital is not going to be covered. I'll guide you on that in future videos. It's if you are using a network option and you're not going to a hospital in the network. But I'll explain that more in a future video. For now, know that the medical aid is going to cover whatever takes place in the hospital. If you have some type of savings inside your medical aid, then it could also cover doctor consults or specialist consults, right? And those are events that happen outside of the hospital. Also, if you have some kind of savings benefit, it could cover medication. So if you need to pick up medication from a pharmacy, for example, it's going to be covered in full if you have a savings inside of your benefit. When you have medical insurance, right? So this is on the insurance side. What's actually covered is just the amount that you have chosen to protect, right? So if it's dread disease or the illness cover, and you have chosen to have 500,000, that's the amount that's going to be paid, right? But they would give you a defined list of illnesses. I'll use an example. Let's say there's 30 illnesses that are being covered here. So what it means is, in order for you to qualify, in order for you to get your 500,000, you need to have one of the illnesses that's sitting inside the 30 events, right? So it's a predefined list. If it's the other way around, if it's not this option, if you went with the option where it's per day that you are hospitalized, so in essence, what's covered is not your hospital bills, it's just the amount that you choose to protect, right? So if you chose 1,000 Rand, what's covered is 1,000 Rand. So meaning in the event of you being hospitalized, if that plan is scheduled to pay 1,000 Rand per day, that's all it's going to do. It's just going to provide you with that. So here's another key difference between the two. On the medical aid side, you can see it's very broad. It's quite open. It doesn't matter what leads to you being hospitalized, it's going to be able to cover that and going to be able to cover those bills, right? It can also provide you with cover with the doctor, as well as if you're needing some stuff from the pharmacy. Whereas on the insurance side, remember, it's a predefined list, or it could be per day. Now, the next secret that I want to share with you is, how do they qualify you? Now, this is key. So I want you to pay very, very close attention here, because you might be thinking that a medical aid is going to be too expensive. And if you're feeling that way, I'm going to let the secret out the bag now. On the medical aid side, see, the qualifying criteria is not so much age dependent, you see, because government's trying to get as many people as possible to belong to a medical aid. So the qualifying criteria here would be more in terms of affordability. So can you afford it? And the premiums are pretty much structured, right? So if you are a 30-year-old and you want to get onto a medical aid and you're choosing a particular option, I'm going to use an example, let's say option A, and you are a 50-year-old who's choosing option A, you're going to pay the same price, right? Because there's a set price for option A. So the only reason that a medical aid could become more expensive, and again, I'll talk about this more in a future video, if you haven't belonged to a medical aid before, they would charge you what's called a late joiner penalty, right? So if you are older than 35, you haven't been onto a medical aid before, they'll charge you a late joiner penalty, meaning the base price is still the same. You're just paying a little extra now because it's their way of qualifying you, right? It's their way of pushing people to start a medical aid before the age of 35. Now, I'll share more in future videos on exactly how to overcome that, right? Or how the late joiner penalty works. How do they qualify you on the insurance side? Now, here's the key. I hope you're paying attention. On the insurance company side, if it's in terms of dread disease or the illness cover, in this case, they're looking for a number of factors. They're going to consider age. They're going to consider your health. They're going to consider things like your smoker status. See, it's a number. They're going to consider things like your income based on the option that you're choosing, right? All these factors play a role in terms of whether you qualify or not. So if you look at let's just use a basic example. If you approach an insurance company and you want to get some dread disease cover, but you had a heart attack, the insurance company is very reluctant, unlikely that you may get cover. If you do, it's going to be extremely exorbitant, right? Because they can add what they call loadings onto it. But it's their way of almost not disqualifying you to some extent. But if you had to look at a medical aid and you happen to have a heart attack, it does not matter because a new medical aid can take you on. See, they're not really taking into account your age. They're not really, in terms of you qualifying, they're not really taking into account your health, right? Because it's basically their way of encouraging as many people as possible to join. So if you're concerned from a price perspective that it could come more expensive on medical aid, now I've helped you to overcome that, right? And then the last point I want to share with you here is in terms of chronic medication. Now, there are a few more elements that separate these, right? Medical aid and medical insurance. I've just touched on the 4, which I felt are going to be easy for you to understand. And just to know that there's a big difference between the two, and also to choose a proper medical aid if your need is for that. And if you have a need for insurance, then you're choosing that as well, or perhaps even a combination of the two. So what takes place from chronic medication? If you have a medical aid, the medical aid can cover this, right? Because the medical aid has what they call PMB, prescribed minimum benefits. And chronic medication, if it's part of the list, for example, high blood pressure or diabetes or raised cholesterol, this is part of that PMB list, right? It's part of the prescribed minimum benefit list, meaning the medical aid itself can continue to cover that, right? Especially if you're choosing something that's part of their list of medication that's covered for it. That's key. Whereas on the other side, if you're looking at the medical insurance, what the insurance is qualifying you for is, have you had one of the list of illnesses that are covered in the dread disease, right? Now, if you think about it, high blood pressure, diabetes, if it's, in some cases it's covered, but you don't get the full payment. Raised cholesterol, these are almost considered to be minor in terms of the dread disease, right? Because dread disease, very often it's looked at something that's a lot more serious, again, depending on the type of option that you chose: heart attack, stroke, cancer. So if you're having something minor, dread disease, if it's not included in the list, you're not going to get a payment, right? And chronic medication, you definitely won't get a payment on the dread disease side. See, no payment there, because this is an ongoing claim. See, it's an ongoing. Whereas when we submit to the insurance company, they're making a one-off payment, right, for that. If you have something or insurance that's covering you for hospital, what takes place here? Remember, they are paying you per day that you are hospitalized. So when you're claiming for chronic medication, because you're not hospitalized, see, it's not going to make a payment, because it's looking to see whether you are in the hospital or not in order to determine whether it's going to make its payment. So you want to analyze these options extremely carefully before settling on the one that is most appropriate for you. Now, again, if you're looking for something that provides you with proper medical aid, where you can get into the hospital and you know the hospital bills are covered and doctor bills and treatment in and out of the hospital, then you want to focus on the medical aid side. On the medical insurance side, if you're looking for something as a lump sum, maybe you've got a bond on your house and you're concerned if you happen to have an illness, how would you settle the bond? Or maybe you're concerned if you had an illness, how would it affect you financially? Then dread disease cover becomes essential, right? Because that can provide you with a lump sum. You also have the freedom to do with that as you please. Whereas on the medical aid side, remember, they're paying directly to the hospital, directly to the doctor. You can't really dictate the terms there, because it's getting paid according to the medical bill, right? It's straight. Medical insurance, I just want to touch quickly on the part of being hospitalized. If you're looking for something that provides you with a payment per day, where you're no longer receiving your salary and you want to have some kind of protection, some kind of income, then this is where this can come into play. But it's critically important for you not to confuse these elements, right? And this is why I put this as the first secret that I want you to learn in this series. When you understand the difference between each one, you can then choose the most appropriate one. And in the end, when it comes to a point that you want to claim, you know that you're getting good value, right? You're getting your money's worth on it. Excellent. So I hope you found the video helpful. In fact, I'd like to hear from you so that I understand how the series is growing and any other elements that you need me to add into the series. So comment below and share with me what has been your takeaways from the session. Also want you to give me a thumbs up so I know that you're finding this video very helpful. And remember to subscribe to the channel so that you're able to get future videos as soon as we post them up. Now, in the next video, I'm going to be talking to you something critically important. So you want to make sure that you know this for the medical aid, because again, it forms the foundation for ensuring that you're having the right cover in place. I'll see you then.